Cats. This is 2.2, day 2. We're in Precal and we're still graphing polynomials. Your assignment actually for class tomorrow was supposed to be on page 149 and 150, problem 71 through 79 odd, and problem 89. We're going to work 3 of those problems together, and then I'm going to assign you 2 of those to work on your own as part of your instruction tonight, and you're going to bring those to class and put them in the folder with your name on them, and we'll talk about them, and that'll be a grade for you. That'll also make sure that you're understanding. We're going to talk a little bit about today about multiplicities. We haven't talked a lot about it in instruction. We've talked a little bit about it in class. Also, don't forget your PSATs are tomorrow. Seniors, you have late arrival. Juniors, you will need to bring your own calculator if you have one, so I would do that. All right, let's get started. Let's go ahead and start with problem number 71. The problem 71 is f of x is equal to x cubed minus 3x squared. And we're going to sketch our graphs. A couple things we do just to get started is think about our end behavior. Since this is a third degree polynomial, we know that the ends of our graph will be opposite since that's an odd degree. And we also know the polynomial begins with a positive, so on the right side we're going to go up, and on the left side then, because it's opposite, we'll go down. So in the end, our graph will look something like that. I'm going to draw my little graph here. And we know we go up on the right and down on the left. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to identify some critical points, and those are going to be mainly our x and our y intercepts. Since we haven't factored anything else, let's go ahead and just plug in for our y-intercept real quick. We can do that right at the beginning. It'll make it a little quicker for us. Our y-intercept, of course, is whenever x is 0. And we should only have one y-intercept. So if we plug in 0 for all the x's, you're going to get 0. So obviously 0, 0 is a y-intercept. Please note that that's also on the x-axis, so it will also be an x-intercept. All right, now let's go ahead and solve. And that's what we've been doing in both the last unit and yesterday, or today in class, was solving our polynomials. Remember, factoring is the best way right now, but if something can't be factored, then you could go to the quadratic formula. This looks like we can factor some good stuff out. So we're going to take out the x squared, and then we're going to, inside parentheses, we'd have x minus 3. Of course, all that equals 0. So the 0 for this is 0, and the 0 for this is 3. Please note something. This is x squared, so that 0 really occurs twice. It has what we call a multiplicity of 2. It occurred twice as a multiplicity of 2, because we really should have 3 zeros, and we do. We have a 3, that's 1, and then 2 zeros, which would be 2. So altogether you have a total of 3 solutions or 3 x-intercepts. It's just that the 0 one at 0 occurs twice. A multiplicity of 2, and so if it's an even multiplicity, we talked about this in class, it will touch. So I'm going to write the word touch or bounce. Okay, because it's an even multiplicity. 3 is a multiplicity of 1, so of course a multiplicity of 1, just like a multiplicity of 3 or 5, an odd number multiplicity would cross the graph. I'm not drawing very good. Would cross. Alright, so let's put those values. We already have the 0, and now we have one at positive 3 as well. Remember, at 0 we're going to touch. So if we're not going to cross, I often will put a little x on mine just to remind myself when I start drawing in my graph, when I get there I should stop and not cross through that. So we know it goes up on the right. We're going to come down. We're going to make some sort of loop. We're going to come up and we're going to touch, and we're going to go back down. And our graph will look something like that. The one thing we have not discussed is we have not discussed these regions right here of how low or high, how far that dips down. We will talk about that a little bit more in our next section, but mainly we'll save that for later on in math. Those points, if we knew the lowest point, would be called your relative minimum, and you can have relative maximums as well. All right, let's move on to another example. The next example we're going to do is example 79, so problem 79. And that problem is g of t equals negative 1/4 parentheses t minus 2 squared times t plus 2 squared. All right, notice a couple of things. This is in a little bit different form. It's actually already been factored for us. And that's good and bad. We have to just kind of pay attention. We know if we multiplied t squared, it would be, if t would be squared, it would be t squared. This would be t squared, and this would be times a negative. So we know that our graph would start with a negative number, which means on the right side, our graph would turn downward. We also know we have a t squared and a t squared. That'd be t to the 4th. That is an even degree, and that means if it's even, all things are even, and the other side would, the other end behavior would be the same. So this would go down on the left as well. So our graph in the end will both be heading, both sides, extremes of our graph will be heading down. All right, let's take a look at what we know. What about our y-intercept? It's a little trickier this time. Our y-intercept is when x is 0, or in this case t is 0. So let's think about what that'd be. We have this negative 1/4. If we put a 0 in for this t, 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. If we put a 0 in for this t, 2 squared is 4. So 4 times 4 is 16 times negative 1/4, and I believe that would be negative 4. So 0, negative 4 is your y-intercept. So let's go ahead and start sketching our graph. I have some graph paper for you tomorrow if you want to pick up a piece. It might help you with your homework, especially as we move a little bit further along in this polynomial graphing. All right, so it's 0, negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just say that's 0, negative 4 right there. And that is our y-intercept. All right, let's go ahead. Since this has all been nicely factored for us, let's go ahead and identify our zeros. So our zeros are x-intercepts. Nothing out of the negative 1/4. T minus 2, that would be a 2. Notice it's squared, so this would be a multiplicity of 2. A multiplicity of 2, which means it would touch. And the other would be negative 2. It's also squared, so it also has a multiplicity of 2, and it would touch. All right, so let's mark that on our graph. So we have one at negative or positive 2 and one at negative 2. Ooh, sorry about that. Negative 2. Okay, so if we want to draw our curve, we already know that they both should go down. Oops. Both sides of our graph will head down. We know that these both have a multiplicity of 2, so that means at negative 2 we're not going to cross, and at positive 2 we're not going to cross, and they both are heading down. So if we move from the south up to that point, we would get there, we would not cross, we would just touch. We would come down the y-intercept, that's going to go through, and it is going to touch or cross, and then it's going to come up and we're going to touch, we're going to bounce again because we're not going to cross through. All right, and your graph will look something like that. It's not the prettiest, but it would look something like that. The last thing I want to talk about is problem 89. Then I've got 2 problems to assign to you to work out and bring to class with you tomorrow. Problem 89. All right, for problem 89, we're verifying the volume of a box. A box, the corners have been cut out, and it's been folded out to make a box. I believe it was metal, if I'm not mistaken. They give you an equation. They give you x, and they give you 36 minus 2x squared. And they want you to verify the volume. Well, if you look at the picture in the book, the picture in the book gives us that one of the sides is 36 minus 2x. They give us a picture of the sides folded up, and the little sides are kind of hard to look at. I'm not very good at drawing those, but the little sides, if you folded them up, are x. And since it's a square, then we're going to assume that the other side is also the same. If we're verifying that this is the correct polynomial at the volume, then we know that volume is length times width times height. Then the length would be 36 minus 2x. The width would be 36 minus 2x. And the height would be height, which is just x. the height, which is just x. And therefore, you've got 36 minus 2 twice, and you have an x. So we have x, and then we have 36 minus 2x twice, so that would be where we are squared. So that verifies it. The next thing it asks us to do is find the domain. The domain. The domain are the x values that would work in this problem. Well, we know that the box volume would have to be greater than 0, and that's one you can forget every once in a while. So we know that our x values have to be greater than 0. We also know that you can't find a value that would make this 0. If you find a value that makes this 0, then a volume would be 0, and we can't have 0. The box can have really, really small volume, but it can't be 0. So let's identify the 0. That would be at 0. Or, look at this, we have 36 minus 2x equals 0. If you move the 2x over, you get 2x equals 36. You divide by 2, and x is 18. So, x is between 0 and 18. 0 and 18, because the volume can't be 0. So if you plugged a 0 back in, your volume would become 0, and that can't happen. So there is the answer to that problem. All right, finally, I've got these two problems I want you to work on, and you will bring them in, and you will turn them in for a grade. It'll also help you practice, and this classwork we just won't do. There will be a video tomorrow night. I want you to watch that video, and then be prepared to work on long division in class on Thursday. So here are your problems. Problem 73 off that same page. That is f of x equals 3x cubed minus 15x squared plus 18x. And problem 75, and that will be f of x equals negative 5x squared minus x cubed. All right, so just make sure that, notice on this one, you want to make sure you go to standard form first. So standard form first. It's easy to overlook and then get confused. All right, hope you have a great evening, and go Bearcats! Beat Kingwood! And good luck on your PSATs tomorrow.